Okay, so this is March 2021, and I've made a few changes to the estimate template, and those are here. So before I had been running the overhead and profit, labor plus materials at 50%, just a very simple 50% markup to the cost of the labor and the materials. And I decided to split it out between labor and materials so that we could give a separate percentage value to each. And the reason I did that is because I noticed that on jobs with a low labor cost and a high material cost, I was getting a very high number. And I'll do an example here. So we've got a job, that took an hour to do, but we had a big material cost. It was $500. So essentially what is happening here is we've got our base rate of $60 on labor per hour, marking it up 50%, and that equals $90. So the labor is $90. I can just put that over there, and then the cost of material in this case is $500. Maybe it's a new door or something. $500. And so your total here, if you're not marking up your material, will be about $590. Now, the client knows that let's say it's a door. Let's say they know that their door costs $500. And for whatever reason, it only takes you an hour to install it or do whatever to it. And so that in this case, the total cost to them with your marked up labor would be $590 versus $840. And so if you go to your customer and say, yeah, it's going to cost $840 to do that job, and you go in and do it, and it takes an hour, that you've made really good money on that. You've made like $340 per hour, which if that's reasonable, that's fine. But in some cases where you've got that high material and low labor, you may not want to do that to your customer. So in this case, we can keep our 50% overhead on labor, and we could adjust the material price, the material markup down, so that you get a more reasonable job cost. For material, if it's just something they have sitting at the house, well, I guess if you spent the money on it, that's probably not the case. But if you have to go pick it up and you've got to kind of mess with it, maybe you do 10% on material, and that brings that whole job cost more into line, more into like a reasonable cost to install the job. Now, the 50% markup on both works pretty well on most jobs that are more labor intensive and less material intensive. So let's go ahead and take a look at that as an example. Let's say you worked from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. You worked 8 hours, and you had $30 worth of material. So in this case, you've made $60 an hour. You've marked that up 50% here. And that's $90 an hour with the overhead. and your material is also at 50% markup, but you're only marking up 50% of to 30, which is going to be an extra $15, so $45. So you've only got a $15 difference here on the material, and that's more reasonable to have in the total job cost. So I hope that makes sense, where you've got a really high material cost that adding 50% to the material can bump that hourly rate way up, which sounds and feels good, but that may not be good for actually selling a job, or the customer may feel like they've been taken advantage of if you charge, $300 or $400 for 1 hour's worth of work, if that makes sense. So this will just give you a little more control to tweak those in those cases. All right, so I'll just go over the rest of the changes here. So that's really it. So here on the timesheet, if you're doing just tracking your hours, then you've now got this new field to play with here. Remember, this is where you set your base hourly rate before markups. If you come down here to the quote section, there's two things that have been added here. One is just a total hours box, because I often found myself going back looking to find how many hours I quoted to the job, because once I get on a job and start tracking it up here, oops, I don't want to do that. Anyway, once you go up here and start tracking hours, you kind of get those total hours here. I always found myself wanting to compare to the total hours on my quote, but since I didn't have a total hours unit here, I was just kind of having to mentally add these up: 1, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, I guess, somewhere in there. And so we've got a new total hours box here that'll help you just easily reference your quoted hours versus your actual hours. And then again down here, we've added that we've split out the overhead and profit to labor and material. So again, you don't want to change these down here, you'll change it up here. So if you want your material to be at 20%, then that'll change down here as well. So that completes the update and the changes so far. If you guys have any questions or comments or requests to change this at all, just let me know and we can get that done. Okay.